Ambassador Vertilek stood perfectly still on the observation deck of his diplomatic vessel, the Gentle Whisper. His 4 eyes watched the empty darkness of space as the ship slowly moved through the outer edges of the Sol system. After 40 cycles of preparation, countless meetings with the Sindari Council, and years of studying human culture from afar, the moment had finally arrived. First contact with humanity was about to begin. The Sindari Collective had watched Earth for 3 decades. They had observed the humans as they took their first steps into space. Building crude stations in orbit around their small blue planet, they had watched as humanity spread to their moon, then to the red planet they called Mars, and eventually to the moons of their gas giants. The council had debated for years about when the right time would be to introduce themselves. Some argued that humans were too primitive, too violent, too unpredictable. Others believed that early contact would help guide them toward a more peaceful path. In the end, the decision was made. Humanity had proven themselves capable of faster-than-light travel. They had established colonies in 3 neighboring star systems. By galactic law, they were now considered a spacefaring civilization and were entitled to formal contact with the greater galactic community. Vertilek had volunteered for this mission. In his 700 years of life, he had participated in first contact scenarios with 12 different species. He was considered one of the finest diplomats in the collective, known for his patience, wisdom, and ability to find common ground with even the most difficult species. The council had chosen him without hesitation. His aide, a young Sindari named Kellex, approached from the communication station. Kellex was only 90 years old, barely past adolescence by Sindari standards. This was his first diplomatic mission. Vertilek could see the nervous energy radiating from his assistant's posture. "Ambassador, the humans have acknowledged our arrival," Kellex reported, his mandibles clicking softly as he spoke. "They have confirmed our diplomatic credentials and are sending an escort vessel to guide us to their capital station." Primary eyes turned toward Kellex, while his secondary eyes remained fixed on the stars outside. "Excellent. What is our estimated time until the escort arrives?" "Approximately 30 standard minutes, Ambassador." "Good, prepare the greeting gifts. I want the cultural artifacts displayed properly. Make sure the translation devices are calibrated for their primary language. And please, Kellex, try to relax. Humans are considered a relatively reasonable species. This should be a simple, straightforward first contact." Kellex bowed his head respectfully. "Of course, Ambassador. I will see to the preparations immediately." As his aide hurried away, Vertilek allowed himself a moment of quiet contemplation. The Sindari had been traveling among the stars for over 12,000 years. They had seen empires rise and fall. They had witnessed species destroy themselves through war, greed, or simple misfortune. They had also seen young civilizations grow into valued members of the galactic community, contributing art, science, and philosophy to the greater whole. Humanity, by all accounts, fell somewhere in the middle of the spectrum. They were neither the most peaceful species the Sindari had encountered, nor the most violent. Their history was marked by conflict, certainly, but also by remarkable achievements in art, literature, and scientific discovery. They seemed to possess an unusual drive to explore, to push beyond their boundaries, to reach for things that seemed impossible. The intelligence reports described them as adaptable, creative, and surprisingly resilient. They had survived numerous catastrophes on their homeworld, from ice ages to asteroid impacts to diseases that had nearly wiped them out. Each time, they had recovered and grown stronger. It was an admirable quality, one that Vertilek respected. He walked slowly across the observation deck, his 6 legs moving in the smooth, coordinated pattern that came naturally to all Sindari. Through the transparent walls, he could see the distant light of Earth's sun, a yellow star that was unremarkable in almost every way. And yet, around that ordinary star, an extraordinary species had evolved. The minutes passed slowly. Vertilek reviewed the diplomatic protocols one final time, making sure he understood the proper human greetings. The cultural taboos to avoid, the topics that would be considered polite conversation. Humans valued direct eye contact, he reminded himself. They communicated a great deal through facial expressions and body language. They appreciated honesty, but also valued tact and diplomacy. When the sensors detected an approaching vessel, Vertilek moved to the main viewing screen with a feeling of calm anticipation. In a few moments, he would see his first human ship up close. The intelligence reports indicated that human vessels were functional but unremarkable. Built with efficiency in mind rather than aesthetic beauty, he expected something similar to the transport ships that most young species got constructed during their early spacefaring years. Ambassador Kellex called from the sensor station, his voice carrying a strange quality that Vertalik could not immediately identify. The escort vessel is emerging from their faster-than-light travel now, telling screen Vertalik commanded. The main viewing screen flickered to life, displaying the region of space directly ahead of the gentle whisper. For a moment, there was nothing but stars. Then, without warning, space itself seemed to tear open as something massive dropped out of faster-than-light travel. Vertalik's primary heart stopped beating. The vessel that appeared before him was not what he had expected. It was not a transport ship or a simple escort craft. It was something else entirely. Something that his 12,000-year-old civilization had never built, had never needed to build, had never even imagined building. It was a warship. A true warship. It's designed from hull to core for one purpose and one purpose only: destruction. The vessel was enormous, easily 15 times the size of the gentle whisper. Its hull was covered in thick armor plating, scarred and pitted from what could only be weapons fire. Along its sides, rows upon rows of weapon batteries protruded like the spines of some ancient predator. Missile pods clustered along the ship's spine, dozens of them, each one capable of carrying payloads that Vertilak did not want to imagine. The entire design spoke of violence, of power, of a species that had looked at the peaceful void of space and decided to fill it with fire. By the eternal void, Kellex whispered from behind him. Ambassador, what is that? Vertalik could not answer. His secondary heart had now stopped as well, and for a terrifying moment, he genuinely believed he might die right there on his own observation deck. In his 700 years of life, in his 12 first contact missions, he had never seen anything like this. No species in the known galaxy built ships like this. No species needed to. The communication panel chimed, indicating an incoming transmission. Vertalik stared at it, unable to move, unable to process what he was seeing. The warship hung in space before him like a predator watching prey, its weapons silent but ready. Its scarred hull telling stories of battles that Vertalik desperately did not want to hear. Ambassador Kellex said, his voice trembling, "They are hailing us. What should I do?" Vertalik forced himself to take a breath, then another. His heart slowly resumed their rhythm, though they beat much faster than normal. He was a diplomat. He had trained for this. He could handle this. "Answer them," he said, his voice steadier than he felt. "Let us meet our hosts." But as the communication channel opened and a human face appeared on screen, Vertalik could not shake the feeling that everything he thought he knew about humanity had just been proven completely, terrifyingly wrong. The human who appeared on the communication screen was a female with short dark hair and calm brown eyes. She wore a uniform of deep blue with gold trim, and several insignia decorated her collar and chest. Her expression was pleasant, professional, and completely relaxed. As if commanding a floating fortress of destruction was the most ordinary thing in the universe. "Ambassador Vertalik," she said, her voice warm and welcoming, "this is Captain Lisa Grant of the United Earth Navy vessel Ironclad. On behalf of humanity, I would like to welcome you to our space. We are honored to serve as your escort to Artemis Station." Vertalik struggled to compose himself. His training took over, pushing aside the fear that threatened to overwhelm his thoughts. He arranged his mandibles into what he hoped was a pleasant expression and inclined his head in the human gesture of respect he had studied. "Captain Grant, thank you for the welcome. The Sindari Collective is grateful for your hospitality." Paused, choosing his next words carefully. "Your vessel is quite impressive. I must admit I did not expect such a formidable ship for a diplomatic escort." Captain Grant smiled, and something about that smile made Vertalic's exoskeleton feel cold. The Ironclad is actually one of our lighter patrol vessels, Ambassador. The Council wanted to make sure you felt safe during your journey through our space. There have been some pirate activities in the outer systems lately, and we take the security of our guests very seriously. Lighter patrol vessels. The words echoed in Vertalic's mind as he stared at the human captain. This monster of a ship, bristling with enough weapons to devastate a small moon, was considered light. A patrol vessel. Something they sent out to chase pirates? That is most thoughtful, Vertalac managed to say. We appreciate your concern for our safety. Please follow us, Ambassador. The journey to Artemis Station will take approximately 6 hours. If you need anything during the trip, do not hesitate to contact us. Grant out. The screen went dark, and Vertalic stood motionless for a long moment. Behind him, he could hear Keelix breathing rapidly, the young aide clearly struggling with the same shock that gripped Vertalic himself. Ambassador, Keelix finally said, I need to show you something. Vertalic turned slowly, feeling older than he had felt in centuries. What is it? Keelix led him to the sensor station, where multiple screens displayed detailed scans of the Ironclad. The young Sindari's hands trembled as he pointed to various readings. I have been analyzing their weapon systems. These main batteries along the sides are kinetic accelerators. They fire solid projectiles at approximately 15% of the speed of light. Vertalic shook his head. That cannot be correct. No spacefaring species uses kinetic weapons anymore. Energy-based systems are far more efficient and precise. The readings are confirmed, Ambassador. I checked them 3 times. The humans use kinetic weapons as their primary armament. Keelix pointed to another screen. These clusters along the spine are missile pods. Each pod contains between 12 and 20 missiles. Based on their energy signatures, I believe each missile carries either nuclear or antimatter warheads. Antimatter? Vertalic repeated, his voice hollow. For ship-to-ship combat? It appears so, Ambassador. And these smaller turrets here? These are point defense systems. Rapid-fire energy weapons designed to destroy incoming projectiles. They have hundreds of them covering every angle of approach. Vertalic stared at the screens, his 4 eyes taking in data that his mind refused to fully accept. The Sindari Navy, the combined military force of a civilization that had existed for 12,000 years, used elegant energy weapons that could disable enemy vessels without destroying them. Their doctrine emphasized precision, efficiency, and minimal loss of life. Wars were fought with careful calculation, with the goal of forcing surrender rather than annihilation. The humans had taken a different path. Their weapons were not designed to disable. They were designed to destroy, to obliterate, to ensure that whatever they hit would never threaten them again. There is more, Keelix said quietly. I accessed our intelligence archives to review what we know about human military history. Ambassador, they have fought 3 major interstellar wars in the past 200 years. Against whom? We detected no other spacefaring species in their region of space. Against themselves, Ambassador, human factions fought against each other across multiple star systems. The casualty reports are... Keelix paused, his mandibles clicking nervously. The casualties numbered in the billions. Vertalic closed his eyes. In 12,000 years, the Sindari had never lost more than a few million lives to warfare. Their conflicts were settled through negotiation, through economic pressure, through careful diplomatic maneuvering. The idea of billions of deaths was almost incomprehensible. What ended these wars? He asked. According to the records, the wars ended when one side achieved overwhelming military superiority. The losing factions surrendered rather than face complete destruction. Keelix hesitated. Ambassador, the winning faction in the last war was the United Earth government. The same government we are about to establish diplomatic relations with. The gentle whisper began to move, following the Ironclad toward the inner system. Through the observation windows, Vertalic watched the human warship as it flew ahead of them, its scarred hull catching the distant starlight. He tried to imagine. What battles had caused those scars? What enemies had tried and failed to destroy that ship? Keelix, he said softly, send an encrypted message to the Council. Priority 1, for the High Assembly only. What should I tell them, Ambassador? Vertilak turned away from the window. Tell them that our initial assessment of humanity was incomplete. Tell them that we are not dealing with a young species taking its first steps into the galaxy. Tell them that humanity has already mastered the art of war on a scale we have never imagined. What else, Ambassador? Tell them that I will complete this diplomatic mission as planned. We will establish relations with Earth. We will sign the treaties. We'll smile and shake hands and pretend that everything is normal. Vertalik paused, gathering his thoughts. But tell them also that we must approach humanity with extreme caution. They are not what we thought they were. They're something else, something we have never encountered before. Kellex nodded and moved to the communication station to prepare the message. Vertilak remained at the observation window, watching the ironclad lead them deeper into human space. In 6 hours, he would arrive at Artemis Station. He would meet human leaders face to face, would negotiate trade agreements and cultural exchanges and all the standard elements of first contact. He would do his duty as a diplomat and representative of the Sindari collective. But he would not forget what he had seen today. He would not forget the sight of that warship emerging from faster-than-light travel, a monument to human violence floating silently in the void. He would not forget the casual way Captain Grant had described it as a lighter patrol vessel. And he would not forget the fear that had gripped his hearts in that moment of revelation. A fear that he suspected would stay with him for the rest of his life. The journey continued, and Vertalik began to prepare himself for whatever horrors awaited him at the heart of human civilization. The 6-hour journey to Artemis Station gave Vertalik time to think. It also gave him time to access every piece of intelligence the Sindari had ever gathered about humanity. He sat alone in his quarters, reviewing files and reports while the gentle whisper followed the ironclad through human space. The more he read, the more disturbed he became. Human history was a catalog of violence that stretched back to the very beginning of their civilization. They had fought wars over territory, over resources, over religion, over ideas. They had invented weapons of incredible destructive power and used them against their own kind without hesitation. They had burned cities, poisoned lands, and slaughtered millions in conflicts that lasted for decades. And yet, somehow, they had survived. Not just survived, but thrived. Each war, each catastrophe, each near-extinction event had only made them stronger. They learned from their mistakes. They adapted. They evolved. They built new weapons for the next conflict. Vertalik found records of something called the Great Collapse, a period about 150 years ago when Earth's climate had destabilized and resources had become scarce. The reports described wars fought over water, over farmland, over simple survival. Billions had died. The old nations of Earth had crumbled and reformed into new power structures. Out of that chaos, humanity had reached for the stars, not out of curiosity or wonder, but out of desperation. They needed new resources, new territories, new places to live. Space was not an adventure for them. It was an escape. The interstellar wars had begun almost immediately. Different human factions, spreading across multiple star systems, had continued their ancient conflicts in new territory. Colony fought against colony, fleet battled against fleet. Entire worlds were rendered uninhabitable by the weapons they unleashed. The United Earth's government had emerged from the final war as the dominant power. They had unified humanity under a single banner, ending the interstellar conflicts through a combination of diplomacy and overwhelming military force. For the past 50 years, human space had been at peace, but they had not disarmed. If anything, their military had grown stronger. The reports described shipyards producing warships at an astonishing rate, training facilities turning out soldiers by the millions, research programs developing new weapons, new defenses, new ways to project power across the stars. Vertalik set down the data pad and rubbed his eyes with two of his smaller arms. He was tired, more tired than he had been in centuries. The weight of what he was learning pressed down on him like a physical burden. A soft chime indicated that someone was at his door. "Enter," he called. Kellex stepped inside, carrying a tray with refreshments. "Ambassador, I thought you might need something to eat. You have been in here for 4 hours." "Thank you, Kellex." Vertalik accepted the tray but did not touch the food. Have you been reviewing the intelligence files as well? Yes, Ambassador. The young aide's voice was subdued. I do not understand how they survived. What do you mean? Every other species that showed this level of internal violence destroyed itself before reaching the stars. It is one of the great filters that most civilizations face. They either learn to live peacefully with themselves, or they wipe themselves out. Kellex shook his head. Humans should have destroyed themselves a dozen times over. But they did not. They kept going. They kept fighting. And now they are here, among the stars, with weapons that could threaten the entire galactic community. Vertalic nodded slowly. I've been thinking the same thing. There is something different about them. Something that sets them apart from every other species we have encountered. What do you think it is? I do not know. Vertalac finally took a piece of food from the tray, chewing slow. Lie, as he considered the question. Perhaps it is their adaptability. They seem able to thrive in almost any environment, to overcome almost any obstacle. Or perhaps it is their stubbornness. They refuse to accept defeat, even when defeat is clearly the logical outcome. Or perhaps, Kellex said quietly, it is because they are predators. Vertalic looked at his aide with new respect. Explain. I have been studying their evolutionary history. Humans evolved as pursuit predators on their home world. They hunted, by chasing prey over long distances, until the prey collapsed from exhaustion. They did not rely on speed or strength or natural weapons. They relied on endurance and intelligence, and the simple refusal to give up. And you believe this predator nature carried over into their civilization. I believe it carried over into everything they do, Ambassador. They do not just want to survive. They want to win. They want to be the strongest, the fastest, the most powerful. And they are willing to endure any hardship, fight any battle, make any sacrifice to achieve that goal. Vertalic sat in silence for a long moment, considering Kellex's words. The young aide had shown remarkable insight for someone so inexperienced. Perhaps this mission would be good for his development after all. A signal from the bridge interrupted his thoughts. Ambassador, we are approaching Artemis Station. Should come to the observation deck. Vertalic stood and walked with Kellex to the front of the ship. What he saw through the observation windows took his breath away. Artemis's station was enormous, spinning wheel of metal and glass that caught the light of the distant sun. It was beautiful in its own way, a testament to human engineering and ambition. But it was not the station that drew Vertalac's attention. It was the fleet surrounding it. Warships, dozens of them. Destroyers and cruisers and vessels that Vertalac could not even classify. They floated in formation around the station like predators guarding their territory. And in the distance, larger than anything else, a single massive ship that dwarfed even the ironclad. What is that? Kellex whispered. Captain Grant's voice came through the communication system, calm and friendly as always. Ambassador Vertalic. Welcome to Artemis Station, humanity's gateway to the stars. The large vessel you see in the distance is the UN Colossus, our flagship. She's here to honor your arrival. First contact with a major galactic civilization is a historic moment for us. Vertalic stared at the Colossus. The ship was covered in weapons, far more than the ironclad. Its hull was thick with armor plating. Its engines glowed with barely contained power. It was not just a warship. It was a statement. A declaration of what humanity was capable of when they set their minds to destruction. Ambassador Kellex said, his voice barely audible. That ship could destroy our entire fleet. Vertalic did not respond. He did not need to. They both knew it was true. The gentle whisper approached Artemis Station, passing between human warships that could have crushed them without effort. And Vertalac prepared himself to smile too, shake hands, to pretend that everything was normal while surrounded by enough firepower to end his civilization. This was diplomacy. This was first contact. This was the beginning of a new relationship between species and Vertalic. Had never been more afraid in his entire life. The docking procedure was smooth and professional. Human technicians guided the gentle whisper into a berth designed for diplomatic vessels, and the connection sealed with a soft hiss of equalizing pressure. Vertalic took a moment to compose himself before the airlock opened. He had reviewed human Customs one final time during the approach. Firm handshake, direct eye contact, pleasant facial expression. Show confidence but not arrogance. Humans respected strength but disliked aggression. It was a delicate balance, one that Vitalik had practiced for years. When the airlock opened, he was greeted by a squad of human soldiers in full combat armor. Each suit was painted a deep blue with gold accents, matching the colors of the United Earth Navy. The armor covered them completely, with helmets that hid their faces behind reflective visors. Weapons hung at their sides, compact but deadly-looking devices that Vitalik's sensors identified as plasma-based sidearms. A human in formal civilian clothing stepped forward from behind the soldiers. He was tall by human standards, with gray hair and sharp blue eyes that seemed to notice everything. His face was lined with age but still strong, still alert. "Ambassador Vitalik," the man said, extending his hand in the human greeting gesture. "I am Secretary Daniel Cooper, representing the United Earth Government's Office of Interstellar Affairs. On behalf of all humanity, welcome to Artemis Station." Vitalik took the offered hand, careful to match the firmness of the human's grip. "Secretary Cooper, thank you for this gracious welcome. The Sindari Collective is honored to establish relations with your people." "The honor is ours, Ambassador. Humanity has dreamed of this moment for generations. To finally meet another intelligent species, to know that we are not alone in the universe, it is more than we ever hoped for." There was genuine emotion in Secretary Cooper's voice, a sincerity that surprised Vitalik. For all their military might, for all their violent history, humans still looked at the stars with wonder and hope. It was an unexpected quality, one that did not fit with the warships and weapons that surrounded them. "Please, Secretary Cooper," continued gesturing down the corridor, "allow me to show you to the diplomatic quarter. We have prepared accommodations that we hope will meet your needs. Our teams have studied Sindari environmental requirements extensively." They walked through the station, the armored soldiers falling into formation around them. Vitalik noticed how the civilians they passed stopped to stare, their faces filled with curiosity and excitement. Children pointed and whispered to their parents. Adults took images with small handheld devices. The ambassador had expected fear or hostility, but instead he saw only fascination. The diplomatic quarter was impressive. The humans had recreated a Sindari environment with remarkable accuracy. From the humidity levels to the lighting spectrum to the furniture designed for six-legged bodies, someone had done extensive research. "I hope everything is satisfactory," Secretary Cooper said. "If there is anything you need, anything at all, please do not hesitate to ask." "It is perfect," Vitalik replied honestly. "Nice. Your attention to detail is commendable." The negotiations began that afternoon. Vitalik sat across from Secretary Cooper and his team in a large conference room overlooking the station's central hub. Through the windows, he could see the constant activity of human life, thousands of people going about their daily business in this artificial world they had built among the stars. The discussions covered all the standard elements of first contact, trade agreements that would open economic ties between their civilizations, cultural exchange programs that would allow scholars and artists to travel between worlds, scientific cooperation that could benefit both species. Nothing unexpected, nothing controversial, and yet Vitalik could not shake his awareness of the warships outside. Every time he looked through the windows, he could see them, the destroyers, the cruisers, the massive form of the Colossus hanging in the distance like a sleeping giant. During a break in the negotiations, Vitalik excused himself to walk through the station's public areas. He wanted to observe humans in their natural environment, to understand them better beyond the formal setting of diplomacy. Alex accompanied him, along with two human security officers who maintained a respectful distance. The station was a marvel of engineering. Shops and restaurants lined the main corridors. Parks filled with green plants provided spaces for recreation. Schools and medical facilities served the population's needs. It was a complete city, floating in the void of space, home to over 2 million human beings. Vitalik stopped at an observation window overlooking the military docking area. From here, he could see the Ironclad and several other warships undergoing maintenance. Crews of humans in work suits crawled over the hulls, repairing damage and installing new equipment. A young human officer approached him. The man was perhaps 30 years old by human standards, with dark hair and friendly eyes. He wore the uniform of the United Earth Navy with a rank insignia that Vertalik Sue's translator identified as lieutenant. "Ambassador Vertalik," the officer said. "I am Lieutenant Kevin Park. Secretary Cooper asked me to make sure you have everything you need during the break." "Thank you, Lieutenant. I am simply observing your station. It is quite impressive." Lieutenant Park smiled and moved to stand beside him at the window. "Artemis Station is our pride and joy. It took 20 years to build. My grandfather worked on the original construction crews. Your family has a history with this station." "My family has a history with the Navy ambassador. My grandfather was an engineer. My father was a pilot. I followed in their footsteps." He paused, looking out at the warships. "The Park family has served Earth for 4 generations now." Vertalik studied the young officer's face. There was pride there, but also something else. Something deeper. "May I ask you a question, Lieutenant? A personal question? Of course, Ambassador? Why do your people build so many warships? You have achieved peace among yourselves. You have no enemies among the stars, at least none that we know of. Yet your military continues to grow. Your weapons continue to advance. Why?" Lieutenant Park was quiet for a moment, considering the question. When he spoke, his voice was thoughtful. "Ambassador, do you know what my grandfather's generation called space? They called it the final frontier. They thought that, when we reached the stars, all our problems would be solved. No more wars, no more conflict, just endless possibilities. But that is not what happened. No, that is not what happened. We brought our problems with us, our fears, our conflicts, our tendency to see others as threats." The lieutenant shook his head. "We fought terrible wars out here. We did terrible things to each other. And we learned a lesson that our ancestors should have known all along." "What lesson?" "That the universe does not care about us. It is not friendly or hostile. It simply is. And the only ones who will protect humanity are humans, ourselves." Lieutenant Park turned to face Vertalik directly. "We build warships because we know that peace is temporary. We maintain our military because we know that threats can come from anywhere, at any time. We prepare for war because that is the only way to ensure we are ready for whatever comes next." Vertalik felt a chill run through his exoskeleton. "And what about the Sindari? Do you consider us a potential threat?" Lieutenant Park smiled, and there was warmth in his expression. "Ambassador, we hope the Sindari will be our friends. We hope that first contact is the beginning of a long and peaceful relationship between our peoples. But hope is not strategy. And friendship must be proven, not assumed." The lieutenant excused himself shortly after, leaving Vertalik alone with his thoughts. Outside the window, the warships continued their silent patrol, their weapons ready, their crews vigilant, and Vertalik understood, perhaps for the first time, exactly what kind of species he was dealing with. The diplomatic mission concluded 3 days later. By every objective measure, it was a complete success. The Sindari Collective and the United Earth government had signed treaties establishing formal relations. Trade routes were planned. Embassies would be constructed on both sides. Scientific and cultural exchanges would begin within the year. First contact had gone as smoothly as anyone could have hoped. Vertalik stood on the observation deck of the Gentle Whisper as the ship prepared to depart. Through the windows he could see Artemis Station one final time, its lights glittering against the darkness of space. The fleet of warships still surrounded it, silent sentinels guarding their people. Secretary Cooper had been gracious throughout the negotiations. His staff had been professional and accommodating. Every human Vertalik had met had been friendly, curious, and genuinely interested in building a positive relationship with the Sindari. Not once had anyone threatened him or shown any hostility, and yet Vertalik could not forget what he had seen. The ironclad with its scarred hull and rows of weapons, the fleet surrounding Artemis Station like predators around a kill, the Colossus, that massive fortress of destruction floating silently in the void. Lieutenant Park's words about hope not being strategy. Kellex approached from the communication station. "Ambassador, we have received clearance to depart." The ironclad will escort us to the edge of human space. Thank you, Kellex. Vertalic did not turn from the window. Before we leave, I want you to send one final message to the Council. Of course, Ambassador. What would you like me to say? Vertalic was silent for a long moment, gathering his thoughts. He had spent the past 3 days observing humans, talking with them, trying to understand what drove them. Now, as he prepared to leave their space, he felt he finally had an answer. Tell the Council that the diplomatic mission was successful. Treaties have been signed. Relations have been established. Humanity appears eager to join the galactic community as peaceful partners. Kellex waited, sensing there was more. Tell them also that we must approach this relationship with great care. Humanity is not what we expected. They are not a young species stumbling into the stars. They are something far more complex, far more dangerous. Should I be specific, Ambassador? Yes. Vertalic finally turned from the window. Tell the Council that humanity is a species of warriors who have chosen peace. They have the power to destroy us. They have the weapons, the ships, the soldiers, and the will to wage war on a scale we have never imagined. And they have decided not to use that power against us. For now, Kellex added quietly. For now, Vertalic agreed. That is the key to understanding them, Kellex. Everything they do, everything they build, everything they prepare for, it all comes down to that simple truth. They hope for peace. They work for peace. But they never forget that peace can end at any moment. The gentle whisper's engines hummed to life, and the ship began to move away from Artemis's station. Outside, the ironclad fell into escort position. Its weapons dark but ready, its crew vigilant as always. Ambassador Kellex said, "What do you think will happen between our peoples?" "I do not know. It depends on choices that have not yet been made, by individuals who have not yet been born." Vertalic moved to his command chair and sat down heavily. "But I know what must happen if we want to survive." "What is that?" "We must become their friends. True friends, not allies of convenience or partners in trade, but genuine companions who they trust and value. We must prove to them that we are not a threat, that we can be relied upon, that we share their values and their goals. And if we fail," Vertalic looked at his young aide, seeing in him the future of the Sindari collective. "If we fail, then we will discover exactly what those warships are capable of. And by the time we understand the full extent of human military power, it will be far too late to do anything about it." The journey back to Sindari space took several days. During that time, Vertalic wrote his full report to the Council, documenting everything he had seen and learned. He described the weapons, the ships, the military doctrine that prioritized overwhelming force. He described the humans themselves, their warmth and friendliness, alongside their capacity for terrible violence. But most importantly, described what he believed was the central truth about humanity. They were not monsters, were not mindless warmongers seeking conquest and destruction. They were a species that had learned through bitter experience that the universe was dangerous, that survival required strength, and that hope must always be balanced with preparation. Secretary Cooper had shaken his hand warmly at the farewell ceremony. "Ambassador, I look forward to a long and prosperous relationship between our peoples." "As do I, Secretary Cooper, as do I." And Vertalic had meant it. He genuinely hoped that the Sindari and humanity could build something meaningful together. He hoped that their children and grandchildren would look back on this first contact as the beginning of a beautiful friendship that enriched both civilizations. But he also remembered the warships. He remembered the Colossus. He remembered Lieutenant Park's quiet words about friendship needing to be proven. As the gentle whisper jumped into hyperspace, leaving human territory behind, Vertalic made a silent promise to himself. He would do everything in his power to ensure that humanity never had a reason to turn those weapons against the Sindari. He would advocate for strong relations, for mutual respect, for genuine cooperation between their peoples, because he had seen what humanity could do. When they decided someone was their enemy, he had seen the scars on the ironclad's hull, the evidence of battles fought and won through superior firepower. He had seen the cold readiness in their military, the quiet confidence of a species that knew it could destroy anything that threatened them, and he knew, with absolute certainty, that he never wanted the Sindari to face that power. The stars streamed past the observation windows as the gentle whisper carried Vertalic home. Behind him, human space grew smaller and smaller until it was just another point of light among millions. But Vertalic knew that point of light contained something extraordinary. Species that had clawed its way up from savagery survived countless wars and built weapons capable of threatening the entire galaxy. A species that had looked at the peaceful stars and decided to fill them with warships, just in case. A species that smiled and shook hands and talked about friendship, while never forgetting that the universe was dangerous and only the strong survived. Humanity would be the galaxy's greatest friend, or its most terrible enemy. And the choice of which path they took would depend on how other species treated them in the years to come. Vertalic closed his eyes and hoped that the Sindari would be wise enough to choose correctly, because in the end, that was all anyone could do. Hope for the best and prepare for the worst, just like the humans did.